Hello, this is Armando Perez-Carreno, and in this video we're going to talk about how to push a Remix application to AWS. The way we're going to do it is we're going to use one of Remix's stacks, which are pre-built templates, to allow us to configure everything on the AWS end without having to do everything manually. So let's dive into it. So what we're going to use is the Remix.run stack, which is a stack or a template that they built that is focused on pushing to AWS via Architect. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So first of all, let's start from the basics. You need to have a Node.js, NPM, at least version 7, and then a code editor, ideally, so that you can modify your code. So let's go into the GitHub repository. There's going to be a link in the video. But here, the first step is just to run this npx command. So what I'm going to do is just going to go in the terminal and paste that. And what it's going to do is it's going to ask you, need to install the following packages, create Remix, because I don't have it here. Okay, perfect. Yes, let's do that. And it's going to go through and install the packages that you might need. So while it's doing that, let me just move it here to the side. And we can see that it covers AWS deployment with Architect, which Architect is a simple framework for building and delivering powerful functional web apps on AWS. So they take care of doing the whole cloud formation for you and setting up the DynamoDB database, the tables, the connections between them, the user roles, etc., etc. So it's really nice because it's a way for someone who's not familiar with AWS to start with an application immediately. So you can focus on, like Remix says, you can focus on the interface and then just get started. And I've seen, or at least in my experience, a lot of times you have an idea you want to start working and you maybe want to push it somewhere and you maybe want to work with AWS, just getting started and figuring out how all the different services and tools work might be something that can slow you down. Like any other platform, it's not particular to AWS. It could be Google Cloud, it could be Azure, whatever. It's harder to run something in a service on the cloud than it is to just run it on your computer. So I like what Architect does here and then the way Remix team set it up for you, because you'll see in a second, it just does everything basically for you to get started. And then you can see all the wonders the AWS ecosystem has for you. So let's go back here and some of the other things that they have. Obviously, the DynamoDB database that I mentioned earlier. It has some GitHub actions to run everything for you for CI/CD. You've got access via Arctables, which is using Architect, styling with Tailwind, which is my favorite, at least at the moment, end-to-end testing with Cypress, local third-party mocking services, unit testing, code formatting, etc. So pretty complete to just get started. And like I said, it's like a little bit of a note-taking application. So here we are, and it's going to ask us, would you like to create your app? Where would you like to create it? So here I'm just going to, it's a special directory I have here for the video. So I'm just going to say, I don't know, my notes app. Okay, and do I want to use TypeScript or JavaScript? Let's go with TypeScript. Do you want me to run npm install? Yes, so that's the default. That's because it will allow you to do everything again for you. So down here, it tells you if you don't want it to do everything for you, you can do this by yourself. But if you just have it do the npm install, it's going to do everything for you. Then down here, it's going to explain that the relevant code for creating users, etc., is going to be in the user server folder. The sessions, etc., is here, and then the notes are here. Then there's some other folders that I'll show you in VS Code where you can see the models for the notes, etc., which you can then modify to your liking. So as this installs, it's going to set everything up for you. And basically, once it's done, you'll be able to just run the application offline in your computer. There's a few additional steps that you have to do, though, to get it running on AWS. So down here, for example, they explain these. So we can go through these while that's working. So the deployment, it says, well, create a new GitHub repo. If you have not created a repository in GitHub before or don't have an account, go ahead and create an account. It's free. It's very simple to do. And then you can actually follow this link called just repo.new. It'll take you to create a new repository. So this one's going to be my notes app AWS. I'm just going to call it that. You can call it whatever you want. Test app for video. All right. And right now I'm going to do it private. I'm going to push another code base later on with the chat application, and that's one that I'm gonna make it public so that you can use it if you want. That's gonna be another video. So here, that's it. I don't have to set a README file or anything like that. So I'm just gonna create the repository. I just need it to be an empty slate. Okay. Well, let's look at the terminal and see where we are. Do you want to run the build tests, etc.? Sure, why not? So it does the tests and everything. It's supposed to be working already. However, sometimes it doesn't do the arc init for some reason. So if I were to go here to this, where it's supposed to be loaded, it'll say Lambda handler not found. So if you see that, don't worry. There is something you can do here. So I'm just gonna exit out of it, and then just make sure you go into the directory that you just created with the application. There we are. And then I'm gonna do npx arc init. All right. And now I can run whatever they are telling us here, which is npm run dev. These two you shouldn't need to run because you said yes at the beginning. So let's just do npm run dev. There we are. It's supposed to be in localhost 3000. So let's try that. There we are. So here's the grunge stack. I can log in. I can try to log in. It's not going to work, obviously. You can use the test account that they have there in the README, or you could just sign up, and this works. So I'm going to just create the test account here. And there it is. View notes for this person. And there's no note. Yes, let's see. Title, my notes. Great. And save. And so there's one note. And then I can create another note. Test 2. All right. Save. So now I have my 2 notes here, and I can log out as well. So that works. Okay. So it works, but we're local, not online. So next steps, let's go into the Remix and see what the deployment is supposed to look like. So here we say create new GitHub repo. We already did that. Sign up, get your AWS account. You should already have that enough. Go and go click here, sign up, create your own AWS account. And then you're going to need your AWS access key ID and access key secret and paste it into your repos secret. So let's go ahead and do that. Just click security credentials. It'll take me to AWS. And here, I'm just going to create new ones. So let's go down here, and I am going to say access keys, create access key. This is a root account. It's not recommended that you create the access key for a root user. So create another user and then create the access keys there. It'll explain everything here, but just for the sake for the video, or if you're just getting started, you want to try it out, you're going to delete it later. This is what we're doing. So I created the access key. So I'm just going to copy the access key and the access secret. Obviously, these will disappear after the video. So let's see what else it tells us to. Go to your GitHub repo secrets and then put the credentials there. Okay, perfect. So what do I have to do? I go here, I go to my settings, and then down here I go to secrets and variables. And then for the actions, I'm going to create the new repository secret, and it's going to be called AWS access key ID. So let's do that. And I'm going to paste this one from here. Here we are. And then I'm going to create another one, and it's going to be called AWS secret access key. And that one, I'm going to grab from here as well. Copy. And paste. Secret. There we are. So that step is done. And then you have to install the AWS CLI. I already have it, but if you don't, just click that link and it'll show you what you can do depending on your operating system. And basically, you can go into the browser, you can do that, or you could do the command line installer, which is very straightforward. This is what I did. Just do this, just copy this code. It'll do it for you. It'll ask you to log in with the Amazon credentials. It'll take you to a browser. It'll ask you if you want that. You can tell it to go through the browser. It'll take you to the browser, authorize, and then it'll go back, and there you go. So once you have that installed, then you create an AWS credentials file, which is also explained here as well. You can just follow the instructions here to create the credentials file and just copy it over to your home directory. And let me just close these out. And then once we're ready, now we can start working. And some of you will already have this done from before. So along with your AWS credentials, you also need to create your CloudFormation session secret. So this here, these commands are just generating a new secret, if you will, with the OpenSSL. It's just creating a random passphrase, if you will, for each of these. And then it's adding them as environment variables using arc. So we just need to copy this into our terminal here. So I'm just going to exit out of it by Control C. There we are. Control C, not Z. Okay. And I'm going to do that. So that's going to create those, and it added them. You can see what it's doing here. It's just creating them and then adding those into the application. There we are. It also says here, if you don't have OpenSSL, you can just generate it with 1Password or any other password tool, and then just copy and paste them and use them here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. So now we can go into the actual file. So let's see. We have to open VS Code. So let's go into VS Code, and then what I'm going to do is drop in my folder here. So this is everything from the project. As you can see, here's the same README file that we had seen before, the one we were looking at, and then you've got everything else. There's one thing you probably want to do. You're going to have the environment variable. So if you followed that guided route where you said yes and it did everything for you, you will already have the node-env and session secrets here. Remember, these are just for the video's sake. They will be gone later. But otherwise, if you didn't say yes and you did it by hand, you have to essentially duplicate the env example into .env and then just create your own variables. So you change the session secret, of course, but that's pretty much it. Okay, so we're here, we're ready, and if you go to the app and you go to models, this is where you're going to see how the node is structured. So you have a node which has a partition key and a sort key for DynamoDB, and this is just the function to get a node, to get multiple nodes, to create a node and delete a node. And then for the server, this is just the function that allows us to create a user, etc. for the users. So nodes, users. Then you have the routes. If you've used Remix before, you know how this is structured. If not, I can explain this in another video. But essentially, you have a route for the index, you have a route for the logout, login, a route for the nodes, etc. It's a little different from some other variations of using Remix, because sometimes you'll have folders inside routes. Let's say the conversations one, and it'll have its own index file or conversations, and then etc. But here you'll do the dot notation. So for example, there's nodes dot and then underscore index. That's the index, and then you've got nodes dot and then $. This is because you have the node ID as a reference, and you'll see it working in the browser in a second. So we have all that. Let's go back here. And so basically we need to push this into a repository, and Arc will take care of everything else. So Architect will take care of everything else. So let's go back here and let's just go to the code. And you see that here I can push an existing repository from the command line. So I'm just going to copy this, go back here and paste it. Oh, well, what happens? I don't have Git set up. So you have two options. You can do Git init right here in the console, or if you're using VS Code, then you can go here and say initialize repository, and then just commit everything and say initial commit, or whatever you want to call it, and commit, and you can just publish the branch. We don't have it set up yet, so ignore that. So I just did Git init. You can do it there, like I said, or you can do it in the terminal by running Git init. Same thing. Okay. Now I'm just going to paste that code again. What it's doing, it's adding that remote and it's setting everything up. Okay. So now I have that new branch for main. Perfect. And now I can publish that branch. So let's go back to browser, and there it is. So now we just need to push it so that our code appears. There we are. So all the code is already here, because if we look at that command that we did, it already did a push at the end. All right. So we have all the code here. And not only that, if you go to actions, you're going to realize that here it's actually doing the deploy for you. So here we are. and we see it doing all the GitHub actions that they have set up. So it's a workflow that is actually set up here. If you go to GitHub deploy, you'll see all the steps that they have here and the Cypress and everything, everything that's doing, it's shown here. So we're just going to let GitHub do its thing. Let me just make sure I didn't push twice. So maybe this one I can cancel. All right. Should just have one, or maybe it's just showing both of them duplicate. There it is. Okay, so I stopped it. Excellent. So this one is the important one. What it's doing, if you go down here, you're going to see it set up the job. It's going to cancel any previous runs. It's going to check out the repo. It's going to set up node. So you can actually go in and see what it's doing. So it's downloading all the dependencies. So basically it's setting everything up for you to do the ESLint to make sure that everything is valid. And then it's going to do all the validation for TypeScript, and then it's going to run the tests, etc., with Cypress, etc. And you can run tests with this stack. You can run the tests locally as well. I can show you this in another video as well, where you can actually open Cypress and its visual interface. It's really nice because it allows you to have it run through the actual application and find the login page and click login and enter a username and password and supposedly see create new node and click that. So very nice. If you're not used to doing those sort of tests, this stack, I feel, is a great starting point, because not only are you setting up an app from scratch, it's giving you everything you need for the database and user authentication and all that, but it's also setting up tests for you. So they're really basic at the beginning, but you can use that as a framework to create other types of models and just give it different types of functionalities, and then create your own tests based on what you see here. So it's not so much back and forth or hitting the wall trying to figure out how all this works. It's already working for you, and then you can go ahead and modify it to your liking. So what we've done here in the video is basically just set up what the Remix grunge template has inside. It has everything for you. We just set up our API keys, and then created a repo, and then publish that repo or push that repo, and now it's doing everything for us. Once it finishes doing all these actions for you, and I'm doing this in real time, it's not sped up or anything. When it's done doing all this, then it's gonna build everything with Architect and do that cloud formation for you. You see the tests are passing here. It's really nice to see when it's doing that. So now it's gonna deploy, and like I said, it's gonna use Architect to create the cloud formation, and we'll be able to find that in your AWS panel. By default, I believe it's US West 2. You can change that in a configuration, but it's gonna do that. And now we're gonna see in AWS, in your account, you'll be able to see that cloud formation template with everything in it. So the DynamoDB database and the lambdas, etc. And you can click to them and see the logs, etc., etc. So it's really nice because you're up and running. And the great thing is, once this is done, and even before, like you can start this process even before doing your first deploy, but I like to do this just so you see. It's a good practice to see how this works. But once you have it, then you can go in and start playing with it, right? So for example, right now I'm not running it obviously, but if I go back to the code here, I can just start playing around with it. So I can go into the app arc while everything finishes. So here, for example, this is one of the settings page for the Architect. So here I have the note. So a note has the partition key and the sort key, and that's it. But I can decide I can do something else. Let's say contact, right? So I could just do basically this and call it contact, right? And this is going to be user ID, the same, sorry. And then this is going to be contact ID. And why did I do this? So let's say I want to build a contact application just to store contacts, right? So I can do that. And then here, if I go to the models, in the app models, okay. So now I see that the models, I have a notes server, which includes the type for the note, and then note item, and the way it's set up. So this is basically two functions. If you haven't used DynamoDB a lot, with DynamoDB, you have the partition key and the sort key, and they allow us to do a lot of really nice queries to the database and really fast queries based on that. So for example, here, what they're doing is for the user, in order to sort of connect users with notes, the partition key is actually the user, and you'll see it right now in the actual database. But with that, you essentially have the user as sort of the main identifier, partition key, and then in the sort key, you have something like that says note and then the ID of the note. So you can query these very simply, and this is just a helper function, so that down here we can just go back and forth using ID instead of having to append note to it. So let's say I wanted to do something like this, but for something else, like contacts, right? I could do it. So I could just create a new file. So I could copy this and say something like contact.server.ts, and this is just a brief example. So here I could decide to change this note to be contact, right? And maybe it has the same thing. Maybe it doesn't have a body, right? Maybe it just has title, and maybe it has name, right? And then maybe it has a last name, and then maybe it has something else like email. All right, and then you can go ahead and play around with it and just change the thing. So here it's not going to be node item anymore. Obviously, we change all the instances of that to contact item, and this is pretty much the same, but I'm going to change this to become, let me just grab this, and all the instances of that, I'm going to say contact hashtag. All right, and I continue, and then this, obviously, like I said, you can go through it and just change everything. And for something like this, maybe you just want to create another application that has contacts instead of notes. You can just modify this, and I'll show you in another video how we can do it. We're going to build a chat with it, and we're going to just change and create conversations. And it's really straightforward to do, because once you change this, and then this other page here, the route, so you create the index, which can be exactly the same as the other one, and this one can be the same as the other one as well. And then the notes new, what we're going to change, these change a little bit, but the notes new is what shows you, like, create a new note, right? So create a new contact, for example, will be the same thing. You just change what the fields that appear, for example, and then here for the notes, it's going to show you the actual note. So instead of showing title and body, it'll show title, or first name, last name, and email. So if we have time, we'll go through that. If not, then we'll show it in another video. But let's go back here and see where we are. Let's see if it's deployed. Yeah, it's deployed. So we're done. The job is complete. So if we go to production deploy, down here, you see that we have a link here. So I can actually click that, and there it is. So this is our application running on AWS. I can sign up, and I can say test@account.com, and okay, create account. Perfect. Sure. View notes. So this is what I was talking about. So no not selected, create a new one. So if I do create a new one, new note, my note. So this here, if we go to new, what's new? This is what we're seeing. Title is required, body required. These are the, this is the note page. You see, here's the form, here's the title, and this is all React, by the way. So title, and then we have the body down here. It's exactly what we're seeing here. So you can just use React. If you already know React, just go in, modify it, and play around with it. And the great thing is, once you save your code, so if you're sure that you've done another model for like contact, and you've done the contact index, and then the contact ID variation, same as notes and the notes new, same as this page, which is the shell, if you will, of this, then you're basically done. You just go into the index page down here. I'm gonna cover it everything because I don't want to make it a very long video. You just go to the index page and then just change that grunge first page, or maybe just playing basically with it. Just change the link here instead of going to notes. Change it to go to contacts. You follow those steps, then you just have an application that does essentially the same thing, but with some additional fields. And as long as you have added these here, then you save your changes, commit them to your repository, and then push them to the live repository, or the main repository for production. Then it'll do this same process. It'll follow the same process, do these actions, check the tests and everything. You'll probably want to modify one of those tests, by the way. And again, I'll go through this in another video to show you specifically, but you can find the tests here, Cypress. And then if you go here, end-to-end test, smoke. So here it is. It's finding sign up, sign in, etc. So if you create some other routes like contact, you can go here and change that so that it follows that path and the test path. So it's good to do the tests first and then publish, but it's great because it'll do everything we saw right now. It'll do it again. So let me go up here and I'm going to go to Cloud Formation here. You have to make sure you are on the right US West 2 region. Okay, so we're going to change to US West 2. There it is. So here's my Notes app, the one we've just created. You see here, and there we are. So it shows you everything, and then we can see resources, and this is everything you have. So we have the catch-all Lambda here. You have the API gateway, HTTP. You've got the node params, etc. You have the tables. So let's go into DynamoDB and actually look at those tables. So it's great because it's already did everything for you. It already pasted everything together. There's a lot of work involved in doing all this. So once you have it, at least you start to get a feel of how everything works in AWS. So here, for example, this is my Notes app. And if I go to Explore, let's see, Explore table items, I don't have anything in there. But if I go to the user table, for example, here's the user, right? And if I add items, so where were we? Here, new note. There it is. So I'm going to add that note. I'm going to add another note, second note. Hey, Harry. Yeah, sure. That's fine. All right. And let's go back here to items and let's run my Notes app. Let's see, note table, run. There it is. So here are my two notes. Here's the primary or the partition key, sorry. And then we've got the sort key, you see, with the ID. And then we've got the body and the title. So you can add more fields and Architect will do that for you. And you can also remove fields, obviously. But like I said, very straightforward. Now you know how to push an application directly from just grabbing a stack, a Remix stack, and following the instructions, having it online. Then you can just modify accordingly and do whatever you want. So this is another example of what we did. Let me see if I have it running here. All right, perfect. So what we're going to do here is just show you very briefly localhost 3000. There we are. So this is just a variation. I have the code right here. It's just a variation of that stack. And if I log in, maybe I have to sign up first. There we are. So this is a ChatGPT version of the node. So I just changed the styling a little bit with Tailwind. I'm just going to create a new conversation, Combo1. And here I can say, hello, I am Armando. There it is. And it's going and coming back from ChatGPT. Hello. What is a car? And the code, actually, when we're going to do this in another video, we're going to go through the whole process of setting this app up with ChatGPT and the API. It's going to go through and it's actually keeping track of the conversation. So who am I? I can ask it, and then it knows I am Armando from the top. And you can see it running here. All right. So I have a log of the application. So every time you get a request, it's going in here and it's showing me the messages that it's doing. And we've got a system message going in at the same time that it's telling it what it is, etc. So it's really nice because you can keep conversations and then you can have multiple conversations going at the same time. So it's really nice. So we're going to do that in another video. Same stack, same Grunge stack. We're just going to modify it and it's going to look something similar to this. Okay. So as you can see, models. So instead of the nodes, right, we now have conversations as well. And it's very similar to the nodes one. And then we've got messages, which are the internal messages for each conversation. That's the only difference, that here we have an array of messages. But again, we're going to talk about that in another video. But that's it. We've got the conversations index, the conversations new, the conversations with the ID. And then we have the arc here. We have the conversation and the message. Like I said, that's exactly what you have to do. And then just play around with it, modify it, have fun. So Next time, we're going to create this from scratch. Well, not from scratch, but using the Grunge template, and then using the OpenAI API to create a ChatGPT interface. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, then go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave us a comment if you have any questions for me as well. And I'll see you in the next video.